Hi! As we know, getting bitten by a spider turns us into Spider-Man. So I wonder, if we get bitten by a bat, will we become Batman or a vampire?
Huh?
Perhaps it's a vampire, because Batman's superpower is his wealth.
What are your superpowers again? I'm rich.
So, today's video will be titled, Can Vampires Exist? A Scientific Perspective. Vampires are legendary creatures that sustain themselves by feeding on human blood. They first emerged in the early 18th century during a frenzy surrounding vampire lore in Southeast Europe. In regions such as Serbia and Hungary, people shared fearful tales of mysterious attacks and corpses that showed no signs of decay. These rumors intertwined, giving rise to the image of a creature that awakens from the dead, feeding on human blood to survive. This fear led to practices such as staking the dead or handling them in some way to prevent their return as vampires. Like the tales from fairy tales, the characteristics and supernatural powers of vampires have also evolved over time. Regarding their distinctive traits, if early vampires were full-bodied with rosy or darkened skin, then from the 19th century onwards, the version 2.0 vampires in movies and popular culture have become more pale and gaunt. In various publications, vampires have been lost in translation, evolving into even more fearsome beings. But above all, a vampire must drink blood, human blood being the most yummy, of course. They can either have a zombie-like nature, meaning they've come back to life from an undecayed or partially decayed corpse, or they could be an entirely separate, immortal species. Vampires might even have a viral origin. We have movies about vampire viruses, as well as games featuring this type of virus. In the movie Underworld, Marcus Corvinus was bitten by a vampire bat and transformed into the very first vampire. Vampires usually have sharp fangs. These fangs can either be permanent or retractable, depending on which movie you're watching. Their eyes can be normal or glow when they're angry, again depending on the film. Vampires don't cast a reflection in mirrors because they're said to lack a soul. Regarding their abilities, vampires are often described as biologically immortal, meaning they don't age and can live for thousands of years. Though they can still be killed, they're usually super strong, able to leap and fly like birds, with strength many times greater than a normal human. Their senses are incredibly sharp, allowing them to smell blood and even distinguish between human and vampire blood. So, it's safe to say vampires aren't really suited for smelly jobs like cleaning septic tanks. Shape-shifting is another signature trait of vampires. They can transform into a bat-like creature. Count Dracula, the king of vampires, could even turn into a werewolf. I can confidently say that vampires are often depicted as idealized lovers, capable of enchanting anyone. After that, they will suck your blood. On weaknesses, in 19th century legends, vampires would burn or even be incinerated by sunlight, a trait inspired by the nocturnal lifestyle of bats. They are particularly vulnerable to religious symbols such as crosses and holy water. They are afraid of garlic. And the ultimate weakness of vampires is a silver stake driven through their heart. Silver, being an antimicrobial metal, seems to also resist vampires. That's about all we can discover about vampires. Now, let's evaluate them from a scientific perspective. Shall we lift the coffin lid and see if they really exist? Vampires resurrecting from the dead? The answer is no. After just 5 minutes without oxygen, the brain dies, and there's no bringing back a dead brain. So, the idea of vampires rising from corpses is purely fictional. But what if a vampire was someone infected by a virus? Although it seems unlikely, it's still entirely possible. When testing a bat, we could find at least 4,100 different types of viruses, including extremely dangerous strains like the Ebola virus and SARS-CoV. So, there might be a possibility that a powerful unknown retrovirus could invade human DNA and turn someone into a bloodthirsty vampire. But that's not going to happen the way you see in superhero movies. Many people think that if you're bitten by a mutated spider and that mutated gene integrates into your genome, the traits, like growing spikes from your palms or gaining super strength, will transfer to you and develop immediately. In reality, it doesn't work that way. Changing the DNA of a few cells might be easy, but the human body has at least 37 trillion cells, and for a full transformation, all 37 trillion cells would need to turn into vampire cells. Not to mention, most viruses kill host cells during infection, and for a virus to attack and modify the DNA of every single cell would take an incredibly long time. So, you're not going to turn into a vampire right after being bitten by a bat. What about the possibility of immortality? Human genetics dictate that we cannot live forever. At the ends of our chromosomes are protective regions called telomeres, which safeguard our genetic code, preventing damage during replication and keeping chromosomes from sticking together. Each time a cell divides, its telomere layer becomes thinner. After approximately 40 to 60 divisions, the telomeres become too short and cell division comes to a halt. And cell division stops. This phenomenon, known as the Hayflick limit, ultimately prevents us from achieving immortality. Consequently, cells gradually die, leading to aging and eventually death. If a vampire's genome had the ability to continually thicken the telomere layer on its chromosomes, perhaps they could achieve immortality, or at least live for several hundred or even thousands of years. How about the ability to fly? Vampires may carry mutated genes that could give them bat-like wings, but actually taking flight would be challenging due to the less than ideal wing-to-body mass ratio. To soar like a bird, an adult human would need a wingspan of around 6 to 7 meters. Additionally, the ability to shape-shift would be out of reach. They certainly wouldn't be able to transform from human to bat, or vice versa. Transforming from one species to another demands extreme changes. Bones would need to reshape, skin would have to change color, fur would have to grow, and fingernails would turn into claws. Biologically, this is impossible. A bat virus-induced genetic mutation might give rise to creatures resembling vampires with sharp teeth or a human-bat hybrid. However, this form would need to be defined from birth and could never be reversible. As for the blood-sucking ability, consider the vampire bat, a creature that feeds exclusively on blood. Contrary to popular belief, bats rarely target humans. Instead, vampire bats usually take advantage of sleeping mammals, even humans, for a meal. However, they don't actually suck blood, they make a tiny cut in the skin and then use their tongues to lap it up. So, if vampires were real, they might simply keep animals like chickens, cows, or pigs for sustenance, rather than eagerly going for human hickeys as seen in movies. Bats aren't really afraid of light, they're just night creatures. They hide during the day not because sunlight would burn them, but to stay safe from daytime predators like hawks and eagles. So, if a vampire is afraid of light, I'd bet he's probably albino. I'm not sure if I'm missing something here, but it seems like vampires would be nearly impossible to exist. But, have you ever heard of a vampire duck? Happy Halloween, and see you in the next video!